Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in to Hobby Hi-Fi. Been a long time no see. Sorry for the lack of content. I've taken a new full-time job at one of my local factories, and I have been busy trying to keep my nose clean there. On the odd Sunday, I get the idea to maybe attempt a project that won't take too long, and today, this is my success story. This is a pair of speakers that I got from a gentleman up in the northern part of Maine. A couple of years ago, when I first heard them, I was pretty astounded by the beauty that these things can belt out. And what are they? They are, uh, yes, MB Quart Domain 55s. And so this somewhere towards the top of the range at the time, I believe in maybe mid to late 90s. And MB Quart at the time and in the old days was a German company. Now, as far as I can tell, these were German parts assembled in the United States. And so it all sounds just peachy to me. However, there's a downside to this. One of the woofers had been replaced when I got the speaker. And so I thought to myself, well, that's never a good thing, but the old fella seemed to know what he was doing, so maybe he chose an appropriate part for the replacement. And so on first listen, I thought, wow, he did a pretty darn good job. You know, I was astounded by the fact that I really couldn't tell much of a difference between the left and right. However, today, a couple of years later, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and say that it's possible, maybe for some old guy, middle 50s, for his ear maybe not to improve because, you know, as far as I'm concerned, as we age, our ears just continue to get worse. But the fact that it's possible for our ears to mature and for maybe the connection between our ears and our brains to improve. Because years later, when I hooked these up, I listened and I wasn't quite so enamored by it. And I thought to myself, am I crazy? Is something off? But I had a simple system hooked up and I didn't think that there was any reason for what I was hearing other than the speaker itself. And so here was the issue. When the woofer was replaced, this is a twin woofer system with two 6.5-inch. Now this is the original here. But the issue was that this, when it was replaced, they had put this replacement woofer here, which it turns out is actually a pretty good woofer made by Vifa, one of my favorite companies, Danish company, good stuff. But what they had done is they had decided to put the replacement woofer up top. And so I thought to myself, okay, when I read the specifications on this speaker, I discovered that, in fact, what they had done is they had crossed over the top woofer to blend with the tweeter in a typical two-way crossover at about maybe 3,000 hertz, okay? And that's pretty normal, I would say. And what they also did in the crossover is they decided that they would roll off the bottom woofer at 120 hertz. So they've actually even got a separation in this cabinet so that the woofer and the tweeter on the top operate in its own section of the cabinet, and the woofer itself is tuned to a different frequency. And so I got thinking about these frequencies, and I think what I was hearing is that this woofer here was not as adept at handling the high frequencies as this one was. So this woofer, having been on top, was lacking in a little bit of extension. that made it quite obvious to me at this point today in the mid-range frequencies, where you will hear most of your information on vocals right around that crossover point where that melds with that tweeter at say between 2 and 3,000 hertz. You'll hear some vocals coming out of that top woofer still with that crossover the way it was, crossed over quite high. And right in that vocal range, it was pretty obvious that this woofer didn't have the same frequency response to me. So I thought to myself, well, hey, what if I take and pull that down and use that as the woofer, so to speak, maybe in a sort of a subwoofer type of situation, because it's crossed over lower, and I won't hear the fact that it's not quite as good at reproducing those higher frequencies because it's crossed over lower, 120 hertz or something like that. I'm not even going to hear those that upper frequencies out of this woofer the way it is now. But when I put that old original woofer back up on top, which is in fact also at more ear level, even more apparent to the ear after some extensive listening. You know, it was pretty obvious to me when I made the switch. So all I did was swap these. And what's unfortunate is this one here is missing its ring. The screw orientation was just a little different. So the gentleman obviously decided that he couldn't use the trim ring that's sort of built into this upper woofer. So when the replacement was purchased, he decided to drill new holes, and so I had to drill new holes as well because the screw pattern was different. Not a huge deal. It went in tight. It's done now, and I think the biggest thing would be to find for beautification, to find a trim ring that might fit outside this woofer and make it look a little bit more like the original. That it will probably never be perfect because it's not an attached. That one's built right onto the woofer. But it's possible that I can find something that I can use to sort of dress that up. Because I am a fan of leaving the grills off. I think that more times than not, your grills will have a bit of an effect on diffraction. And when you add another inch, sticking out onto your baffle, you're going to have some increased reflections, and I like to let them breathe, so to speak. So anyway, I thought I would share that interesting situation, and I was pleasantly surprised when I turned on the same song that I heard a more clearly defined sense of left and right, and a more balanced presentation from both of these, having the same woofer on the top in that mid-range type roll, if you will, and let something that had been changed represent a smaller portion of the pie. Worked out perfectly. Excellent speakers. I highly recommend these. The only downside is that you have there's not a whole lot of option back in that time frame, but to use this vinyl wrap. And when you ding this vinyl wrap, let's see if I can find a spot. Well, kind of hard right now to find one. But yeah, maybe something like this. Once you ding this vinyl wrap, haven't quite found the answer to be able to blend that in, hard to cover up a chunk, I mean, the only thing that I've been able to sort of come up with is a piece of electrical tape or something like that to sort of cover, but we'll see if I come up with anything there. But anyway, excellent set of speakers. These were almost $1,000 back in the day, and I'm going to say that they're almost worth it. Of course, you won't pay that today, so I'm going to say if you can find a good deal on the MB Quart Domain 55s, grab them, and you will not be disappointed. The rubber surrounds on those woofers should give you a lifetime worth of enjoyment, and these are titanium tweeters that obviously have very nice extension, and that the parts that they chose were very purposeful, and that they did a fine job with their crossover and a fine job of picking their parts. And excellent. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time. Thank you for my new subscribers. Thank you for being patient with me. Happy Halloween.